Hello, everyone, and welcome back to On the Roll with Matt. At the end of this month, I will complete my Bachelor of Science in Behavioral Health Sciences. Then, at the end of August, I will begin my master's degree in mental health counseling as I continue toward becoming a licensed mental health counselor. That is meaningful for me to say, not because a degree suddenly makes someone wise, not because education erases the past, and not because reaching one milestone means the struggle is over. This moment matters because of what it took to arrive here. I enter this next chapter as someone who has experienced addiction, recovery, homelessness, disability, professional uncertainty, physical decline, interrupted plans, and the difficult process of rebuilding a life when the future I once imagined was no longer available. I live with Friedreich's ataxia, a progressive neurological condition, and I use a wheelchair full time. My body has become more limited in ways I did not choose. Yet, while my physical world has become more restricted, my understanding of human behavior, suffering, faith, recovery, responsibility, and purpose has continued to expand. That tension has become central to this channel. What do we do when life removes some of our options, but our responsibility to live meaningfully remains? What do we do with the life we have actually been given? Not the life we expected, not the body we wish we had, not the history we would have chosen, but the life that exists now, unfinished, unpredictable, demanding, and still capable of profound meaning. There are many things I cannot control. I cannot command my nervous system to function normally. I cannot reverse a progressive disability through determination. I cannot control whether every person understands my needs, recognizes my experience, or values what I have to offer. But disability has taught me something important. When control becomes limited, responsibility becomes clearer. I may not control everything happening around me, but I remain responsible for what I cultivate within me. I am responsible for how I speak, how I treat people, how I communicate a boundary, how I ask for help, and how I respond when I feel frightened, disappointed, dismissed, or misunderstood. That does not mean our circumstances are irrelevant. Some barriers are unjust. Some environments are inaccessible. Some systems need to change. Advocacy matters. Accessibility matters. Compassion matters. But social change and personal growth are not enemies. We need a society willing to become more accessible, informed, compassionate, and just. We also need people willing to become more self aware, emotionally healthy, and conscious of how their choices affect others. Compassion and accountability should never be treated as opposites. Compassion says, what happened to you matters. Accountability says, what you do next also matters. Both are necessary for transformation. That is one of the deepest lessons I have learned through recovery. I am approaching 17 years of sobriety. Recovery did not begin when I learned how to explain my addiction. It began when I became willing to understand it without using that understanding as an excuse to remain unchanged. There were wounds beneath my behavior. There was trauma, fear, instability, loneliness, and a powerful desire to escape reality. But healing required more than identifying where the pain came from. I had to examine my patterns. I had to acknowledge the harm. I had to make amends. I had to become willing to hear truths that did not flatter me. And I had to learn the difference between shame and responsibility. Shame says, you are beyond repair. Responsibility says, you are capable of doing better. Shame tells us to hide. Responsibility calls us into the light. Grace does not deny our worst moments. Grace reminds us that they do not have to become our permanent identity. Transformation begins where truth and grace meet. Recovery also taught me that insight alone is not transformation. We can understand our behavior and still repeat it. We can learn the language of trauma, boundaries, and emotional regulation while continuing to respond in unhealthy ways. Knowledge becomes meaningful when it becomes practice. Change is built when we pause before reacting, when we tell the truth even when hiding feels safer, when we apologize without attaching an excuse, when we ask for help, when we attend the meeting, when we make the next right decision, even when no one is watching. This is also the heart of emotional regulation. Self-regulation does not mean suppressing emotion. Emotions matter. They reveal what feels painful, threatening, meaningful, or unresolved. But emotions are messengers. They are not always qualified to become commanders. We can feel anger without becoming cruel. We can feel rejected without retaliating. We can feel misunderstood without abandoning respect. We can experience fear without allowing fear to make every decision. The goal is not to create a life where nothing ever affects us. That life does not exist. The goal is to experience difficult emotions while remaining aligned with our values. That is freedom. Freedom is not the absence of discomfort. It is the ability to remain grounded while discomfort is present. My faith has taught me that surrender is essential to this process. Surrender is not quitting. It is releasing the illusion that I control every outcome while remaining obedient to the work that belongs to me. I cannot force every door to open. I cannot guarantee that my future will unfold exactly as I hope. I cannot know what my body will allow years from now, but I can remain faithful to the next responsibility. I can complete the assignment. I can ask for the accommodation. I can attend the meeting. I can choose sobriety today. I can continue learning today. One day at a time does not mean the future is unimportant. It means the future is constructed through the decisions we protect in the present. Returning to school was part of rebuilding my life. After more than 13 years working in addiction, homelessness, recovery, and behavioral support, I had to confront the reality that my disability was changing what kinds of work were physically sustainable. I had to consider that the way I once served people might no longer be available to me. That required grief. But grief is not the same as defeat. Sometimes the purpose remains while the method changes. Sometimes we do not abandon the calling, we adapt the route. That is why becoming a mental health counselor matters so deeply to me. I want to combine professional education with lived experience. I want to support people facing addiction, trauma, disability, grief, shame, and major life transitions. I also want to help make behavioral health care more accessible through telehealth. For some people, telehealth is convenient. For a disabled person, it may be the difference between access and exclusion. Accessibility is not simply about making life easier, it is about making participation possible. As I enter my master's program, I want to become a counselor who honors pain without reducing people to their pain. Someone who understands trauma without treating it as destiny. Someone who practices compassion without treating people as incapable. Someone who recognizes that support and responsibility belong together. A ramp does not carry a wheelchair user into a building. It removes an unnecessary barrier so that person can enter. Counseling, community, accommodation, accountability, and grace should do the same. They do not remove our responsibility to participate in our lives, they make participation possible. Looking back, I am not grateful for every painful thing that happened. Some losses remain losses. Some limitations do not become beautiful simply because we learn from them. But I am grateful that suffering did not receive absolute authority over who I became. Addiction did not receive the final word. Homelessness did not receive the final word. Disability does not receive the final word. Unemployment, uncertainty, and closed doors do not receive the final word. They are part of my story. They are not the author. And now, at 41 years old, I am completing my bachelor's degree and preparing to begin my master's program. Our lives cannot be measured only by what has happened to us. They must also be measured by what we are becoming through what has happened. So receive the support you need. Ask for the accommodation. Attend the meeting. Go to counseling. Tell the truth. Make the amends. Challenge systems when they are wrong. But remain willing to examine yourself as well. My bachelor's degree is nearly complete. My master's journey is about to begin. But the deeper education continues. I am still learning how to surrender without quitting, how to acknowledge limitation without surrendering purpose, how to offer grace without abandoning truth, how to honor emotion without being ruled by it, and how to keep moving forward when the route looks nothing like the one I originally imagined. This is not the end of the road, it is simply another turn. So keep rolling, keep learning, and never underestimate what can still be built from a life that did not go according to plan. I will see you in the next episode of On the Roll with Matt.